Hi everyone. Hi Kim and Joe. Today we will have a transformation talk about integrate business planning series. This is episode number 2 already. Today we will talk on demand planning management and solution. Why everyone must be think about demand planning because demand is a initial side from sale from customer to make profit in organization. That's why important. And also many organizations still have is a lack of management on demand side. Today we will have is a Tim Gray and Andrew to discuss with us about this. Hi, Tim. What do you think about demand planning or planning for point O? Why many organizations have is a pain point on that, and how to improve it?
Thank you for the question, Siddharth. Everywhere in all of our clients, we're seeing more awareness of how important demand planning is. I think if COVID has taught us anything, it's that you cannot just rely on history. But many organizations get very overwhelmed by the forecasting process. And what we find interesting is many businesses focus on forecasting as a technical task, something sales must do. And in my experience, the real benefit of forecasting isn't in getting beating a sales team up until they can get a high magic number like an 80% forecast accuracy. While that's still a desirable place to be, the biggest benefit we see is getting everyone in the organization to share and agree on with the best information they have to get one set of numbers to work with. Because if we not include everybody in the forecasting process, we find engineering will have their forecast on when they think they're going to do maintenance based on a guess on when the market might be quiet or the machine might be available. Finances will do their forecast based on what they think cash flow will look like. Sales will do their forecast to figure out what their commission might be. Inventory planning will do their forecast based on what we think we might sell, and purchasing will do their forecast based on what they think they need to buy. And if these are not all the same numbers, it's the organization is pulling in different directions, and it is very common, amazingly common. The bigger the organization, the more common it is, and it's very disappointing to see. And then it's common that programs will start and people will start improving forecast accuracy, but they do not have the mechanisms in place to make sure that the forecasts are including everybody that needs to be involved in the forecast. And if they don't, the rest of the organization is still off using their own numbers. And so for me, the biggest benefit we get on forecasting is when we get a whole organization involved, or at least everyone that needs to use the forecast should have a chance to regularly touch the forecast and input to the forecast so that they can share their input and understand the depth of how good or bad the forecast is.
Okay. So if we need to improve forecast management in the digital series, talk about integration from ERP and from shop floor. How is work for that?
The forecasting will drive, it becomes an input to almost all of the planning functions in our ERP systems. Now they have limitations, and one of the best ways we've seen this done, and we tend to work for it, is we take the forecast and all the different forecast streams, and forecasting can appear very complex when you think we have trade marketing and marketing spend, we have information from our customers and forecasts from them, we have head office giving us trend data, and we've got new product development giving us forecasts on phasing in of new products. And it's very easy to very quickly pull your hair out and think, oh, what's going on? And your ERP system can typically not handle more than one forecast. It's very good on one source of truth, not very good on multiple forecasts. So what we do at Profit is we make sure that you have your demand planning is done outside of your ERP system, and then regularly we have our best business estimate and we push that into the ERP system for execution. And we push it into either in our own tools or other business warehouse tools for later recollection and comparison for forecast accuracy and for learning and for reporting metrics, but we want one forecast to execute to. Sometimes if we're getting very advanced and we start running multiple scenarios, we'll have one forecast for each scenario. But the ERP typically can only handle one. So your execution in there and scenarios will keep offline.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Andrew, if you visit many clients in Asia, when they do SOP meeting, how they can do more effective and good consensus on that? I think you may suggest on that process.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because I think what people think they're doing is an S&OP meeting, but what they're really doing is having a roundtable argument of finger pointing. You know, the first part is looking for the outcome, right? And making sure that the outcome is readily agreed. I think we sort of talked a little bit about this in the previous episode as well, where people have to understand this is not about winning and losing. It's about an agreed outcome, and some people will have to change the way they're looking at it, because if you think about the genesis of the word sales and operations planning, it doesn't just mean you sit in there with sales and operations, because operations is fairly broad. You know, there's got to be that, as Tim alluded to, there's that finance perspective as well. So I think setting the ground rules for what this looks like and what outcome you're trying to achieve are really, really key. And then, you know, you need that sort of arbiter or the keeper of the process who makes sure that everyone's participating in the right way. So, you know, I think hard questions need to be asked in those meetings. You know, are sales being a little bit too aggressive? You know, are the finance guys being a little bit too conservative? Are the R&D guys not actually telling you something that they're working on because they think it's top secret? You know, that's for me, when I look at clients doing this across, who are doing this really well, it is just such an open discussion, but all driving towards the one thing.
Okay. That is many organization they have is a good software already, or they think that is good enough because they already implement MRP. Then when they implement MRP, they already have ERP in their organization for sale, for finance, for operation, for supply chain. Is it enough for this team? They already have MRP-ERP. That's enough for demand management solution.
In many businesses, it is not. I think we used the term last session that ERP systems are necessary but not sufficient. And if you have maybe 4 or 5 SKUs, if you make roof tiles and that's all you make, then it's likely that the tools inside the ERP will be sufficient. But if you have 1,000 SKUs or even 200 SKUs and a broad range of customers, it becomes increasingly unproductive to try and manage every single SKU across every single customer at a forecast level across every period to build a bottom-up forecast. And because market intelligence doesn't present itself to us at a SKU customer period level, sometimes we find, you know what, water sales are growing at 4% every year. And so we want to be able to check that our bottom-up details match that. And if they don't, perhaps we want to adjust. And in other cases, we'll find out that a customer is transitioning part of their business. We don't want to have to go through every single SKU and build that all up because it becomes too cumbersome and too hard to check. And if we make the forecasting process that you can enter the data at the same granularity that the market intelligence presents itself to you, you can very quickly do a correlation between bottom down and top down and bottom up forecasting that builds a complete picture. And ERP systems haven't got this. They use the really detail, but they rely on best of breed tools to actually, if you need to segment that or provide better user interface, then that typically requires other tools like the Profit Suite to sit on top of the ERP and allow you to use this data in a way that makes sense for the business. If I can just elaborate a little further, one of the easiest ways to kill a key account manager's efforts in forecasting, if you want to go and energize your team and you want them to get the best information possible, and I've seen these poor sales guys have to go in every SKU every week and every customer and go through and type in numbers into SAP or another ERP system, and then someone higher up in the business comes along, the CFO says, no, that's not good enough, the margins aren't there, and then they go and overwrite them all together or drop them into Excel and change them, or otherwise ignore what the people have done. It is incredibly frustrating because there's no there to allow you to quickly say, oh no, I need to reduce that by 5%, or this portion of my portfolio I need to increase a little bit. You should be able to put in, we call it forecasting by exception. If you want people to, I want our clients to be able to talk to their customers, pick up nuggets of intelligence that are useful for them, and be able to very quickly build a forecast based on either what the customers told them or based on history or statistics or other foundational information, and then make by exception, when they find information that contradicts that they can quickly apply those changes at the granularity that the market intelligence makes sense. When you do that, like I said, we call it forecasting by exception, you're spending your time just quickly and lightly touching the system to get the outcomes that you want. That's value added, and you can do that with the customer, sitting next to the customer, talking to him about what's changing, or him or her, about what's changing in their marketplace and what you're seeing versus what they're telling you. That's a high value added forecasting program. What isn't is you go through every bit of detail, and that's the difference between an ERP type of forecasting where every bit of detail must be manually entered, and a refined system is designed to get market intelligence into the system and challenge and review that data.
Mm-hmm. And also, Tim, I saw your maturity model for planning series. You can show your cartoon graphic that I like is that perspective a lot to ensure everyone can understand what they stage to improve. I think they have some idea to improve in their organization.
Sorry, this is not the one you're talking about. That's what we're trying to avoid. So this it's a playful. This graphic is a playful, but really there's some good meaning behind this. It's very, very common that a lot of businesses, there's a lot of forecasting tools on the market, and they exist again because the ERP systems are quite cumbersome to use and quickly become overly complicated. So there are other forecasting systems. Those forecasting systems tend to tell you need statistics or the latest machine learning. And while we have the statistics and the machine learning, that to me is it's not correct. It sounds like a good sales message because it's like saying, oh, don't worry, your sales team, they don't have to worry about forecasting, we'll do it for you. It sounds nice, but for me, if your business to consumer and you're like a supermarket and you have 80,000 people come through your store in a day, you cannot have a conversation with each of them about what their buying habits are. So you must use statistics. But if you're a business and your customers are business, you're B2B, then you must have a conversation with your customers, because you gain an intimacy with your customer and you start learning about things that statistics can't tell you, like they're having a promotion next month and they're going to change the artwork or the packaging of everything they're buying from you. And so be ready for that. Your statistics won't tell you. The statistics will only tell you what's happened in the past. It won't be if they've changed their product altogether or if they've decided to outsource and you might be losing the work. You won't hear this, but you'll fill your warehouse. If your customer's a business, you must have those conversations. And many things can be done before you worry about the machine learning, which is the last 10% of your forecast accuracy. Mostly we have businesses that don't forecast. We then have people that try and forecast, just we call it naively, which you're just using last year as a guide for what might happen. And that's better than not looking at all. But as we've seen this year, particularly with COVID, this has got some dangers, yeah? for some businesses, but some of your products may be very stable, others very unstable. It's important that we understand which is which. We then often businesses start using Excel, but Excel, like putting your forecast straight into your ERP system, very quickly becomes cumbersome. But it's a good start because you can start overlaying some trends and some high-level aggregate numbers to see if you're on track or not. And then we start using tools like Profit and so on, and then really start getting into demand modeling. What this graphic doesn't show, and finally the machine learning. What this graphic doesn't show, but for me is the biggest and most important part here, is that collaboration within your organization and then outside to your suppliers and your customers is one of the true benefits and potentials of IBP that this graphic is just two-dimensional to show. But when you get, for example, your CFO involved in the forecasting, you'll find he has an interesting perspective that the rest of us may not about things like how exchange rates influence your export sales or other things. But you'll find that their views are very different, but also very valuable. You'll find that including the NPD or the research people that Andrew just mentioned, and the people involved with bringing new products to market, having them involved in the demand review gives you other insights that you wouldn't otherwise get if you just look at it from a sales perspective. So tying these people in, you'll find there's different people with nuggets of experience and information in the organization that allow you to make a much richer consensus forecast that is much more usable through the organization than just leaving it with sales to check their commissions. So that I continue to believe that's the consensus is often undersold because software vendors want you to buy their software and believe that you don't have to be involved. That's leaving all the benefits off the table unless you get everyone involved in the organization.
Okay, that is a good model from each stage. For example, from static forecast to demand planning management. What should look like that we should have time for their organization implement from people skill and technology is application. How long they can improve for each state team?
Look, that's a great question, and the stunning thing is if you look at forecasting as the task of forecasting and improving forecasting, it can take years to make dramatic difference. But you normally get the biggest benefits the further down on the left of that diagram where we're just looking at, the quicker you can make changes. So, for example, it would be common for us to start with a client that might be a 20 or 30% forecast accuracy. We'd expect to get them up to maybe 50, 60% within a year.
Right.
But to get them to 90% might take 3 or 4 years. But really interestingly, the biggest benefits come in the organization, and the value to the organization comes by firstly getting everyone involved that uses a forecast, so they all get a chance to look and feel about it, and they start realizing they can trust those numbers because they're as good as they've already had a chance to input, and they're as good as the numbers they were doing in Excel. But we see real value hitting the operational impact in things like inventory reduction and delivery performance improvement almost immediately if we can show, if you segment your products even before we start improving forecasting. As we're implementing forecasting, we segment the products, agree which products are A, B, C class from a value point of view, and then we do another X, Y, Z. Commonly, it's different for different businesses, but we do another segmentation of the products to see which are highly repeatable and reliable, which are high value but are very sporadic, and which are low value and sporadic and very hard to forecast. And by segmenting that, if you've got, for example, 1,000 SKUs and 500 customers, suddenly your problem goes from being, 5 million units deep or something, or 500,000 entities deep, to suddenly you've got these segments that you can start looking at. Do I need the same supply chain strategy for each of these? And do I need to hold the same stock? And just by sharing that information, you can start streamlining your inventory and streamlining your purchasing and your service level activities, and that can allow you to really focus your forecasting as well, and just focus your forecasting first on the items that matter, rather than trying to do everything and scare everyone off. So there's a piece of work that you can do very quickly, like within a month, you can get that information calculated, analysed, and available. And then it might take a month or two to start sharing that and rearranging how the business works to it. This can be done very, very quickly. And you'll get results from that while you're starting to build the habits of getting the business looking at the forecast and starting to see where we can improve it. And the reason why I'm so excited about that is the minute that your forecast accuracy improves, if you've already got those mechanisms in place, it results in improved purchasing, it results in improved stock levels and service levels, where if you don't have those mechanisms, you can go on a 3-year plan to get from 20% forecast accuracy to 80% and see no business impact from it. Better forecast, and then so what? So you must have the other mechanism. But if you do have the other mechanisms in place, your business will start to run in a fundamentally different and better way.
Okay, that I think is more clear. Andrew, is you talk about is if they have same outcome when they do has a meeting on sale and operation planning, how they have is a more effective consensus and collaborate. Because it's if I'm sales side, I'm thinking this is a data forecast from customer side, how they can manage data that is quite fluctuate from the customer perspective to is a demand side for more accurate sales perspective.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because I think if you look at the data that people come armed with, it looks at it in different ways. So this is where you can utilize your ERP data really, really well. So good historical data, good elements in there that help you argue your case is great. But as Tim also alluded to, it's having that conversation with them to bring that along as well, because you should be questioned on these things. You know, if someone comes in and says, we're going to have a month because of X, Y, and Z, that's very hard to argue with. And this is where planning 4.0 sort of comes into the next generation of data. Is if you're bringing in unstructured data, that's very difficult to convince people with, because unstructured data is always tough. So if it's something that's not as tangible, that's very difficult. But if you've got some structured data that you can bring to the table, and this is a little bit like homework, right? You know, you've got to come prepared. You can't come and just say, this is what I think is going to happen. You have to do that homework. And again, that's where it comes down to, we've talked about this before. This is making sure people are very clear what it is that is not going to get them, it is going to get them what they want at the end of the day. And if it's more inventory because they think they're going to do more sales, then come with the data. And how you get that, again, can be ERP driven, a little bit too rear vision looking, but statistical data from your ERP can help. But also, you know, it could be that unstructured data of, and Tim mentioned this, and you know, I remember being very, very guilty of this in my my early years being a procurement person, was you know, not understanding the knock-on effect of things like Forex. So, you know, is someone hedging a lot on Swiss francs because that's where we're purchasing from, and the finance guys are hedging lots and lots of Swiss francs because we're buying lots of flavors from IFS. You know, this is where you've got to come with that structured data that talks about, well, maybe we should hold back on certain things because here is what the data is telling us. I think the you know, just on that next evolution as well is where we will see that structured data linking between all of these companies as well. You know, I know a lot of ERP systems now are working on linking company, that B2B ERP together, so that you're now working off someone else's best data as well, rather than relying on that word of mouth. So I think that's kind of where you're going to see these things change as well, because people can now actually come in with someone else's data that proves your point. So I hope that kind of, it was a very, very short question made long, I know, sorry.
Okay, that is they said this data came from assumption for each person of sale. So sale said this is a assumption from is a customer perspective. So they don't know exactly what is a more accurate data until it's happen other invoice. That is real demand from customer side. So that is an issue. Tim, what do you think is when we have, because it's when we look at demand perspective, we have is a long period of demand view, a mid-term period of demand view, and short period of demand view. How software can manage to more accurate demand perspective for each period of time?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it's a really useful way of thinking about the whole forecasting process. If I start with the longer one first, the longer horizon scenarios actually lend themselves for scenario mapping and tools that allow the users to manually massage the scenario that you want to look at. So if I'm looking at 3 months to 3 years, and this long range is industry specific. If you're talking about fresh milk, it might be 3 days. But for a lot of businesses, you know, a year or 2 years, 3 years may be long range. Other businesses, 10 years is long range. But in that longer range, just being able to get your historic data and use statistics or otherwise manipulate that forward and use that for things like capacity planning or scenario modeling to see what my factory footprint might look like, or distribution network might look like. That is absolutely suitable for using algorithms to disaggregate your forecast and blow that down into requirements in periods. We use the digital clone. A lot of people call it digital twins. We call it digital cloning of your plant and your network, and we take your forecast and your history and we blow that forward, allow you to tweak it and intervene with it, and then pass that through into capacity views and constraint views, so you can see what you need to purchase and what you need to what constraints you're going to live with and which ones you're going to challenge. That works really, really well. Then there's the machine learning is fantastic in the short term for demand smoothing or demand sensing, where you might have, for example, short-term run-on we saw in Australia. I'm not sure if Thailand was the same, but when COVID lockdowns first happened, everyone ran in and bought toilet paper. It's kind of odd. We need food, but you know, everyone wanted toilet paper, and the Australia-wide demand for toilet paper went through the roof. And modeling what that looked like for the coming days was really good. The demand sensing works extremely well. But if you allow it to go too far, it would have told us that the consumption of toilet paper by the end of the year would have been 10 times what the industry average was, and would have told them to buy more factories. That's not true. We weren't using more toilet paper. There was a short-term thing. So it's it can be really good, but really dangerous if you overplay that sensitivity. It allows you to respond quickly, but it can over amplify long-term effects. And one of the things when I was working with the CSIRO on getting our forecasting algorithms fit for business use, one of the messages I learned from the head of analytics at the CSIRO was, he basically said, never ever let the computer statistics model a demand until you understand the demand yourself. And I still hold on to that today, and it flies kind of a little bit in the face of what everyone's saying with AI and machine learning, and and don't worry, the computers have got this. You don't need to worry about it. But my deep belief continues to be from that learning is that you must apply a human perception to what the stats are telling you, or otherwise make sure that there's a business that the story makes sense. And in fact, if I can jump ahead, the best demand reviews, I know when we've got it, when we're working with our clients and they've got it well, because they're telling stories about their channels or their customers or the different goings on in the marketplace and what's happening with their forecast. They're telling stories and they're using the data and the analytics to support those stories. But the stories are what we can, as people, we can really get our heads around. So short term is really, really good demand sensing, and some of the AI and analytics are really, really good in that space, but still need to be managed. And longer, the 2 weeks to 3 months is definitely where you want the market intelligence from your customers and your key account managers and the order horizons of your orders to coalesce, and we want to check those. So that's where you kind of phase between the longer range. Doesn't matter so much if I get a SKU level fluctuation I hadn't picked up yet out 4 months from now. What I'm doing with that horizon is typically I'm checking that I've got machine capacity, I'm checking I've got the crews, and I'm checking that I've got the raw materials on the water that I need to make sure it's going to land here in time that I can make what my customers need. The SKU mix we can normally survive that. But in that kind of short term, after the demand sensing, the 2 week to 3 month, it's really important that we have a lot of that we've got our best minds and our best information really well perceived, because that will run out of stock, or we'll run our customers out of stock if we're not watching.
Okay. And also, I saw some concern when I visit or consult with some customer. They have is a planning staff, maybe it's a 5 or 10 person in their organization. I asked why they have is a many is a planning staff, because they said as a one department, one planning guy, to ensure they can cooperate together, they can follow up fast. When we said is if they improve by demand planning solution software can help more efficient, they said no, they don't need it because it's they have 10% already. But when it's a COVID happen, cannot work in the office, that is more effective. They call us again to present how can improve on that. What do you think? Because it's in terms of person, they think they choose secure job for planning staff, but in terms of software, that's more effective than is 10%. How they can positive on this issue?
Yeah, that's a great observation too, and we've seen that as well, where some systems you end up with so many people trying to feed the beast, or whether it's running an Excel or otherwise, a lot of manual work. We want to elevate people and augment what they do, so that we want to make sure that they let the computer do the dumb stuff really quickly, like take the signals that you put in and let it disaggregate, so you don't have to sit there working through Excel spreadsheets trying to figure out what if the customer's demand continues to increase with COVID, or if it's reducing for whatever reason they can't get stock, then what those implications look like on each of your stock levels. That's not good value added. Right? When we can have computers can do that, what we want your people who are in demand planning is to be presented with the data and to be able to challenge it, check that that's the best information we can have. But I call it, we don't want to overcook the forecast. The less time you spend doing clerical stuff, the more time you've got to analyze. And the more time you've got to analyze, the more time you can actually then get past the analysis and start executing on what we're going to do, the response measure. Right. In my mind, I want planners to be doing response measures that are fixing the supply or making sure our customers get what they need. I don't want them spending time trying to figure out, overcooking the forecasts. We've seen businesses where you've got too many people spending too long on forecasting. It's just an estimate. In my opinion, if the three of us sit down and we want to forecast something we know nothing about, it may take us the water consumption in Thailand, and we want to forecast that next week. If we have good systems already showing us what's being sold, what's been used, where it's been used, and we've got the stories and the background around what else is going on, we will be able to, even though I know for me, I know nothing about it, we will very quickly be able to start understanding the trends. Because if the information is already compiled for you and you can check and challenge, you'll quickly understand as well as anybody what's going on. That's the power of having a very visual system that allows you to drill down and check and refine assumptions. And what you find is if people aren't used to having that top down while they're doing the bottom up, they spend all their energy in bottom up, and they'll never know. If you try and bottom up, or imagine you try and bottom up forecast every one of your expenses, everything you spend a cent on every day, and you try and roll it up to your household budget, I guarantee almost nobody will get anywhere close to what their household budget is. You can't go, if you go into too much detail, you get lost. You've got to be able to be down and up And tools, systems that are designed for this, like Profit, are very, very good at allowing you to quickly get what you know in and not labor it. And then, because we want to move on to solving these problems for our clients. I think that there's very little value in having people just doing forecasting unless they can then take that and then use that to help the rest of the organization respond to the forecast. So that's what I think you should be looking at, is it would migrate those people from just getting the demand signal to actually using the demand signal. And that transition will make them far more important for the organization. They'll spend far less time, but they'll do a much better job if they can do bottom down and top down and bottom up at the same time. They'll very quickly get to the nuance and the nuances of what's important to the demand signal. It's been the demand analysts rather than the demand planners, demand forecasters.
Right. I think this is a good thing to do. As Andrew is for accurate forecast in term is a sales perspective, but for if they have a good demand planning that impact to supply chain side for material management in their organization, how they do for demand planning to more effective on material management in their organization. Hi Andrew, you are still here or losing?
We lost you, Andrew.
Okay, maybe Andrew lost. Is Tim? May you answer the same question, because I think we don't need only demand planning more accurate forecast in terms of supply chain. If I'm a supply chain guy, I would like to manage material. I would like to manage as well resources. So what they have more benefit on terms of demand planning solution.
For them, for many demand planning solutions, they'll promise you improved forecast accuracy. And while we will absolutely do that, I still believe that when I'm supply planning, the most potent thing that we can see is firstly what the forecast is, and secondly what the accuracy of what the known volatility is, and that absolutely is game changing. And so imagine, this is not commonly done inside the ERP system, but imagine when you go to place your order for steel for a can manufacturer, for example. If I know that I need 2,000, my business estimate is we need 2,000 ton of this steel next month, and I need to place the order now, but I can see the standard deviation of that forecast is plus or minus 250 ton. That is a very different equation than I've got a 2,000 ton forecast and I've got 1,000 ton standard deviation. Just seeing that volatility and seeing that confidence interval while I'm planning automatically lets me know maybe I need to plan more, or I can use that to automatically calculate my safety stock. But if the system's calculating my safety stock, I can reliably know 2,000 ton, I don't need to pack it anymore because my safety stock is responding already calculated on that, or my safety time is calculated on that. Or alternatively, if I don't have that sophistication in my planning systems, at least I know I've got, a plus or minus 250 ton likely variance on that. And that's quite groundbreaking, because most planners, most supply chain people don't get that. So everybody in the supply chain process is going, oh, if I run out, I'm going to get my bum kicked. So I better have a little bit more. And you get squirreling and padding out everywhere through the supply chain, where the way that we lean and we right size this and we reduce the cash spend and we make sure the product flows correctly, is making sure that we have enough to cover the volatility. And other than that, we're working to the business estimate. And that's quite liberating, taking rid of that guesswork and making sure that everyone in the business is working to that one set of numbers with a known volatility down to the components that they're looking at.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Hi, Andrew, you are back. So, okay, we just to ask some question about supply chain size in internal management, because we need forecast accuracy, and also for supply chain guy, they need more well-managed material and resource in their organization to ensure they can serve is a sales side. How benefit is a demand planning solution can get benefit from that to improve supply chain internally?
So getting those benefits across what you would see as the value chain of supply of the supply chain.
Right.
So that in the demand planning area, I think the biggest thing would be, again, is to be looking at it not in blessed isolation. That the supply chain is a big it's a lot of things. So what you've really got to understand is what is the connectivity to each of them, and how are you using that connectivity. So from a demand planning point of view, everyone is going to have a benefit as that starts to get better, and that you concentrate on making sure that the accuracy is there. So, I was thinking about this earlier as Tim was talking about the complexity of SKUs, and then you also mentioned one area, one planner. It depends on the complexity of the business. I remember working with a client in Vietnam who quite rightly has some very heavy demand planning problems, because they have so many SKUs, but also they're competing in so many different areas. And I think this is, so they did everything from dairy products through to sports drinks through to, so at one point their competitor analysis is very different in one area, and the demand changes in certain parts of the business quite rapidly as well. So if you think about the demand for dairy products, really there's a direct effect on seasonality. There's a direct effect on availability, particularly when you're talking about not necessarily using fresh dairy as well. And I think this is where, you have to be very sensitive to what's left of you and what is right of you within the value chain. So I kind of tend to think of supply chains as a bit of an amorphous mass. They're lots and lots of things, but they're all cogs in a wheel. And that demand area, if you're getting that more accurate and you're getting that demand and understanding it better, the cogs turn better, and that synchronicity comes into the business. I also think it's important here to also recognize that some of this just isn't rocket science either. There are businesses that are not overly complex. So you don't really want to be making something complex that really isn't. So I think from that point of view, you've got to also be viewing your demand plan as something that you're trying to make as simple as possible to understand, and therefore remove some of the potential complexities that people tend to build in of their own choice.
Okay. That is, they should have more lean and more effective in the supply chain side to ensure they have more cash in the organization, right?
Yeah, and just to that point as well, if you've got 10 planners today, that doesn't mean you go from 10 to 1. What that means is those 9 people become far more effective, as Tim alluded to, in other parts of the business, because you will see that other parts of the business become stretched when planning gets better, because you're requiring parts of the business that you now need to concentrate on. So, it's not a zero-sum game. It's not taking bits out of the business. It's actually putting them back into somewhere where they can be far more effective.
Okay, that's good. Thanks for your question. Tim, do you have some success case study where they implement demand planning solution, what they achieve and what they have some challenge to improve on that?
Yeah, I do. I might just I'll just share a screen with you while we go. So one of the first things I'll tell you about the client in some detail, but I just wanted to show you this too, because it plays to what Andrew was talking about. This is just a click of a button kind of ABC analysis on a client I had on the screen here, and knowing that this SKU sells $54 million a year, and it's their biggest seller, and that's $10 million a year, and so on. Seeing that the product portfolio like this is interesting and common, but being able to see it in terms of the volatility and seeing that this has got that SKU is 8% volatile. And by that I mean its standard deviation to its mean is only 8%. It's incredibly stable. So sorry, somehow I've sorted that incorrectly. But so if I look at that, the highest volume product there's only got 2% volatility. It's incredibly stable. This one's 7% volatile, and so on. These guys are lucky enough to incredibly stable demand, and yet you'll see some other products are quite unstable. And just by running your eye down this, you can see, well, there's some really volatile SKUs that we should manage carefully, and there's a whole lot that we don't need to worry about. In fact, these guys are lucky enough that most of their A-class items are insanely stable. So, and yet when we started working with them, had so much of their team focusing on the A-class items that didn't need to be focused on. They were overworking their forecast. Now, I just wanted to share with you a quick case study. I'll just talk through this because the slide's a bit busy. This is a food can manufacturer. They make steel cans.
Can you show on full screen, Tim?
Oh, yeah, of course. Thank you. So these guys, they were using SAP. They were using the forecasting in SAP. They were about $150 million revenue. We did an opportunity assessment with them to see where they're at, and we immediately identified that they really had too much raw materials. I think I alluded to it before, that their purchasing guy was, if he ran them out of coil, the coil's like 20-ton rolls of steel when they stamp out these cans that you put beetroots in or pineapple in and so on, and tomatoes in. And if they ran out of steel, they'd stop the line, and it was worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, and he would get crucified if he stopped the line. So he always had extra stock. But because he wasn't able to, all he could do is look at what they used in the last year, and yet the business was always trying to down-gauge and always trying to use smaller steel. So what he ordered last year was not a good representation of what he's going to order this year. But he had nothing else to work on. So he was doing the best he could, but he had $18 million worth of stock. So firstly, by sharing with him what the forecast was, and by sharing with him what the forecast accuracy was in the same year that we started, we were able to reduce raw material inventory by $9 million. And then later, over the course of the 4 years it's taken us to get them from, they were at 29% forecast accuracy. We got them up to 79% forecast accuracy. Now that's taken 4 years, but it was not a particularly hard process. We just started using Forecast Manager and having good demand reviews. We were looking at doing praise and art cycles where we're looking at their portfolio of the 1,000 SKUs they have, and looking at what was reliable and what wasn't, and where we weren't sure of the forecast, we were looking at what the customers were saying, what the key account managers were saying, and we were helping them build up these stories about where there were differences. And our only requirement to go to the demand review was that you're looking for what's changed since last month, and we make that easy for you to see. And if you're the key account manager, explaining what's going on, and hopefully you've checked that with the customer already if it's a profound difference. And by putting in this cycle of reviewing, and then also reviewing what we're ordering, we made sure that raw materials immediately got under control, because we're passing the forecast through to raw materials. And then we started working on forecasting accuracy. The forecast accuracy has seen a further improvement in finished goods stock of $25 million. Now, this business with a very, very low margin, for them to in the first year get a $9 million cash flow improvement, and then in the following 3 years after that get another $25 million of cash flow improvement. They have done so well that they've absolutely taken market share on a declining market. They've taken market share off their competitors, and they were able to weather disruptions to the business. There were floods in parts of the country that resulted in their competitors having warehouses that were swamped, and they were able to supply their competitors, customers, as they were on long-range contracts. They were able to do that, and over time they've been able to win those customers over, because the customers became aware that while there were all these different things like earthquakes going on in New Zealand and floods in Queensland and so Well, our clients were able to continue supply because they had a really strong forecasting system backed up with a proper supply chain planning system that would allow them to run scenarios of, well, we've got all this extra demand we can satisfy. How are we going to do that? Do we have enough steel? Do we have capacity? And they were able to navigate that, keep supply up to their own customers and to their competitors' customers while the competitors were in strife. And basically, they won not only that immediate business, but then they've won the long-term business as the competitors' customers have come over to them because they're able to guarantee supply more often. So it's been an incredible journey for them, not only the $25 million of inventory reduction and $9 million of raw material reduction, then they've had significant growth in a declining market because they've been able to take customers off their competitors because the supply has been so good, despite there being some crazy disruptions. And we're all seeing the disruptions of COVID now. And again, they're continuing supply where the competitors aren't able to because they don't have a good planning process.
Okay, that is really interesting because I think it's in Thailand is do you know as for this year steel price increase a lot. So
Yeah.
if we can reduce inventory is maybe 25%, that is huge impact.
Yeah.
And we also saw in your outcome that is reduce time for planning 75% and replace all spreadsheets. How is work for that?
Yeah, so where they were using SAP and SAP APO, but they were having to drop everything in Excel to do their forecasting, to do their master scheduling, to do their scheduling, to do their capacity planning. And so once they started using Profit, which is a fully integrated planning system, we were able to replace their spreadsheets with a system that meant they weren't dropping stuff into Excel and trying to figure out the answer, right? Because the system's working for them. I made a comment earlier on when we started talking that we want to see the planners, whether demand planners or master schedulers or sequencers in the factory. We want to make sure that they're spending their time, firstly, that they can easily see where there are problems and they're planning by exception or forecasting by exception. And then when there are problems, they've got plenty of time to focus on and fix those problems. That's high value added. Our job here is to augment the process that the people are going through. We want to make sure that they can do more, and we do that by we take the clerical stuff away from them, so they don't have to format data in Excel, they don't have to drop it into Excel, and they don't have to hope that they don't introduce any errors in their formula or whatever. So we do all that for them, and then we draw their attention while they're forecasting or planning to where that forecast looks odd. You know, it's changed a lot since last week. Why is that? Or that's interesting because we thought that there was a growth in pineapple. And yet you're not forecasting that, and yet we're getting this market intelligence that pineapple crops are going to be big. Well, why doesn't the forecast follow? And you can easily see that in that process, so it draws your attention there. And rather than people having to find their own data and in Excel spreadsheets and do the analysis a consistent way, we're doing that for them so that your planners are actually focused on what's important. They go from reactors to planners is the reality, and well armed with the right information.
Okay. In terms of organization, when they start project to improve demand planning, who should concern and in team member? Andrew, can you suggest, because I think it's not only a planning manager to do the project by their own, who is a team member to implement for demand planning solution?
Yeah, it's to be fair, it really begins where Tim alluded to earlier, which is you really need to run a process before you start changing anything around what needs to be done. And that starts with the data that you've got. That's starting to look at doing some analysis around all of these things. So generally what you're looking at is someone who has a higher visibility of the supply chain. So it kind of begins with people who are doing the roles and getting that data in and doing that analysis, because what you want to be able to do is make sure that they're focusing on the right things. So generally it's going to be someone who it's not a specific procurement person. It's not specifically, that the supply area becomes important, but not so much. So demand, you've really got to be working between the sales teams You've got to be working with where that data is coming from with sales. You've got to be looking at it also from a financial perspective. So you're starting to pick up a number of different people from a number of different areas. And it's got to be someone it's got to come from an area that probably has the most to gain from getting this right. Again, I hesitate to sort of put finance in charge of anything, but they tend to be a very good arbiter, but they don't necessarily understand the intricacies of the supply chain. But you also don't want to get carried away with supply chain people talking about all their idiosyncrasies. So for me, you've got to formulate, you've got to pick, you're kind of trying to pick someone who can put a foot in both camps. And it may not be the person you think that already sits in what you would define as your demand planning area either. A lot of this comes from the ability to look at it through a lens that is good for the business, not good for one particular area. So, being an independent consultant for many, many years, I'd say go out and get a good independent consultant. But even that doesn't work unless you've got the people on board inside the business, and they need to understand what it is. So, I think it's definitely someone who comes from within your supply chain, but it's going to be different in different businesses as well.
Okay. Tim, when I visit many client, they would like to start for demand management, but they don't need start by demand side. They would like to start from planning, scheduling first. When I asked them why you need to start planning, scheduling first, they said, this is internal management process. Can do is so quick. But for demand side, with the customer, with the sale, that's quite hard. What you suggest about where we should start from demand side first, or planning and scheduling first?
Yeah, it is a common dilemma that if your sales team is not used to forecasting, it can be quite daunting. And even depending on the products and services that you're selling, you may not have clients that salespeople that need to be deeply embedded with the customers. So there's all sorts of dynamics there that can make that difficult. I don't mind it when we start the demand planning process with an internal demand manager, but if your clients are business to business, or if your business is business to business and you've got big business customers, to me, it's really important that we have planned to quickly get your key account managers involved. It's not an integrated demand plan, but getting a demand signal, and like I alluded to before, you can quickly do an ABC analysis and volatility of your demand and design your supply chain very quickly. Like within a month, you can get that and start shaping that while you're bringing sales on board. And I've seen demand review processes not go so well if you just leave sales involved in charge. But they should definitely be part of it. They need to be part of it because we want the communications with our customers. So for me, don't leave them off the page, but it can be absolutely fine to start just getting systems up and running and getting a demand signal in, and then bring in your key customers first. It's fine to phase your salespeople in, but don't leave them out in the cold. Don't exclude them from it, or you're never going to get to an integrated business plan. We want to get the customers in, and we want the customers to know that we're helping them and looking at their demand signals and really utilizing it. So for me, there's all sorts of good reasons. And we've got a program called the BRAD review, a business review and development process, where we teach the salespeople how to actually use the forecast that the customers have given, or our own forecast if they haven't given us a forecast, and talk to them, use that to talk to them about what's going on in their marketplace. Here's what the orders that we've got for them, what's going on. And you use that. If the first thing you talk to a customer about is their forecast accuracy, it's very hard for them. No doubt the first thing they want to talk about is the price reduction, but it immediately takes the sword out of their hand if they're not helping you help them. There's actually quite an elegant cycle of having just like in a demand review, having a standard process of an agenda to talk to your customers about. And your customers, if they see value in it, they'll keep turning up. They'll allow you to come and meet them and have these meetings. If you show them things like, here's what you ordered, here's what you took, or here's what you forecast, this is what you took, or this is what you took last year, this is what you tell me you're taking this year. What's different? What's changed? So, and you're not being aggressive. You're just trying to understand, me being the key account manager here, trying to understand what's happening with my customers. It becomes incumbent, and they'll start trying to understand why they're sending you the demand signals, because it becomes incumbent upon them to be able to answer it. It's a very elegant way of making yourself really entwined with the business. And salespeople initially get a little bit, oh, wait, you're going to tell me how to sell? No, we're going to tell you how to talk to your customers about their demand. But what you'll find out of that is that sales happen without you trying. And you'll learn about promotions, and you'll learn if they're actually, your demand is dropping because they're trying another supplier, and you become on the front foot rather than just being the consequence of not paying any attention to them. You start seeing these changes in time to respond. So it's a very, very powerful tool for demand management, and it naturally ties into the forecasting process while enhancing their sales process. So there's some very elegant ways to do it. While we do that, there's plenty of other people that do it as well. But for me, the important part is that you tie in your forecasting with your business review and development process, and it becomes an asset to the customers and, our key account managers.
Right. Andrew, what you suggest, because it's many clients that I visit, when we present to them, they think they would like to start for planning and scheduling first, because they think it's a well-management internal process. But it's an initial process from sales and customer side they need to do, but they worry about hard to manage. What do you suggest on this?
Yeah, it's an interesting point, because people try and tackle the things that they think they're most in control of, and that scheduling piece is only as good as what it gets told to do. So to be fair, what you've really got to look at is what is going to make the difference here, and that's not to say that scheduling is something that should not be looked at, because they've definitely got some great points of view on how and when they should be doing certain things, right? So, but they can't do it well unless they understand exactly what that demand is, and they're making decisions based on good data. So for me, it's a little bit you're not going to get big changes by looking at the scheduling, because they're still going to be making the same decisions, just based on and still based on poor data. So for me, it's really, and a lot of these decisions are kind of based on, I want to look at my workforce, because the workforce is very high when you look at shop floor as well. So they think that because they can get these guys, because there's 1,000 of them, that's going to bring them more benefits, and that just isn't true. Generally, what you're looking at is you're trying to get the pointier end of the stuff more accurate, so that those guys can do their job properly and well, and do what they do well, which is make stuff. So you don't want them concentrating on having an argument with the sales guys because they think it should be different. It gets better when you move down the value chain. So if you're right at the end of the value chain, it really is, if you're the warehouse guy, it's just literally pick up the pallet, put it away, and make sure that we can get to it quickly if we need it. If you're in the middle for scheduling and production, that's where they're taking the best estimate that someone else has got. Then they're making the best use of the assets that they have to hand and the data that they have to hand. But it's all the way back down here at the value, the coalface end, with, as Tim alluded to, back with the customer, or back with where that demand is coming from, where you're actually going to see all the benefits flow through your value chain, rather than trying to push it back up the other way. So it's very tempting, but it's, again, what I would say is you could do some very quick analysis that tells you what benefits you're going to get out of doing this bit of the value chain differently to this bit of the value chain. And
Right.
that to me is where people need to stop and think a little bit more logically about where they're going to get those benefits and that ROI. For me, they're always the key. No one does things because it's fun. No one, well, hopefully you do things because they're fun, but in business, you're not doing it
Right.
to do that. You're there to make money.
Okay, that is a draft answer from this, because it's next episode we will talk about is a supply planning solution. Then we will know we should select it on planning scheduling first for internal, or we can do both for demand planning solution from outside. We will talk more detail for next episode about supply planning solution. That is thanks Tim and Andrew for today. We will see you next week on Thursday again for supply planning solution, how improve it. Okay.
Pleasure.
Awesome.
Thank you, Sir
That's
Juan.
it. Thanks so
Looking
much
forward
for
to it.
today, everyone. Bye now.
Thank you.